Well, look, it's really a privilege for me to speak to you and to address the bright minds in Israel and thank you, and in the world in the space of cannabis. Yeah, you might be indeed intrigued as to why I'm here and what I have to tell you about, given the fact that I'm working for a tobacco company, and what could be the relations between tobacco and cannabis. Well, I think everybody can understand that there are clear parallels between the two industries, starting first and foremost by the fact that at the core of it lies a plant that has compounds in it that consumers are trying to get into their body. We're talking about nicotine in the case, of course, of tobacco, and we're talking about cannabinoids in the case of cannabis. But more than that, and more than just the plant, I think what the tobacco company and tobacco industry and companies went through in terms of their development and evolution for the past decades, let's say 19th and 20th century, has a lot of experience, a lot of value to a new industry that is emerging now, and is that of the cannabis one. But let's start with the fundamentals. Yes, it's about the plant, it's about the active molecules, and it's about cultivation to start with. And indeed, over the 20th century, the tobacco industry, the tobacco leaf industry, underwent a number of cycles of maturation and consolidation in order to get to the level of a commodity that tobacco is today. But as demand for tobacco products and cigarettes grew in the early 20th century, so did many complexities emerge. First, demand increased, supply increased, prices went down, which is kind of expected. But with that came the need for new methods, agronomy, agricultural best practices, how to grow the best tobacco plant to get the highest quality of nicotine on the one hand and taste and experience on the other. The industry also went through issues such as how to address the dependence of some countries and some regions to tobacco leaf cultivation, how to address the issue of child labor in tobacco fields, how to deal with the ecological impact of water and energy, sun, which both plants actually are very hungry and intensive about. The whole industry needed to organize itself in terms of trading, exchange platforms, how to meet demand and supply in a way that was trustworthy, in a way where people could know what they were buying, and therefore came standards, internationally accepted standards, to figure out what is the grading and the quality of tobacco, to price it adequately, and to know what comes into the cigarettes at the end of the day. So we could imagine that possibly what the cannabis industry might be experiencing, and of course it has a huge range of possibilities, could have some aspects which are very close to what the tobacco industry experienced in terms of the key aspects that made it happen. Economies of scale, efficiency, sustainability have been and are at the core of what that industry is about. But when we look at the consumer product, well, there also the search for quality, for differentiation, for branding. The emergence of brands, cigarette brands, have been the best example of how quality and positioning could be transmitted in the eyes and understanding of the consumers. These brands had to be built, and we all know about the leading brands and the iconic brands that have been built in the 20th century in terms of cigarette labels. And then, of course, you have players that position themselves on the premium aspect of the spectre in order to reap that premium from consumers who are willing to pay for quality and for brand power eventually. On the other hand, you have cost leaders who try to play a mass game by reducing or making their products less expensive. So these things are natural developments of what industries are coming up with when they are indeed facing a growth period. But likewise, if we look at route to market, the more the consumption, the more the consumers. And the more the consumers, the less tolerance to sub-efficient distribution channels. So the tobacco industry learned to optimize its distribution models, its route to market, to ensure that availability could be met for the consumers to find their products as they needed. And that came with the development of systems of logistics and again of economies of scale to reap the maximum benefits out of that industries. In terms of development, tobacco companies expanded, of course, internationally, whether organically by entering countries or markets, or through business development and acquisitions, essentially acquiring local incumbents, often, by the way, government ex-monopolies, in order to replace their portfolio and transition their smokers to international brands. So today, I guess it's quite, and you know it better than I do, it's quite liberal to consider that cannabis, especially on the medical side, is very upbeat. On the recreational side, follows a couple of years later eventually. But let's remember that in the first half of the 20th century, tobacco and cigarettes were seen the same way. It's only as of the 50s, essentially, when research proved that the effects of smoking tobacco were a problem for the health of their smokers, that things started to change, that the society started to be less inclined towards tobacco and towards cigarettes. Regulation kicked in, taxation kicked in, and essentially a need to churn the industry into a different direction. And by the way, the tobacco industry probably didn't do a very good job in those days in terms of the decision they took on how to best manage that, and many mistakes, you could say, have been made. So we could imagine that what actually the tobacco industry went through all of these years and these decades could, to some extent, be a bit of a prequel to what the cannabis industry could experience. And that's why I thought it could be interesting to have this discussion to see where the parallels and the learnings could be drawn. So the big difference, I would say, is that while the tobacco industry took, say, 150 years to develop and to mature, we're talking 19th, 20th century. Now in the 21st century, the speed at which the cannabis industry will probably develop is certainly 10 or 20-fold faster. And that's why it's so important to make the right decisions now, rather than waiting too long, because it's now that the industry is being shaped. And the experience from the tobacco industry can be very valuable because it faced many challenges that could be avoided had they been better anticipated. And this is exactly what I want to talk to you about more specifically now, or today, let's say. It's about actively dealing with the issues and essentially breaking ranks with traditional tobacco. Yes, that's what it says. and in order to do that, I want to just first start with the fundamentals. Again, the plant. The plant which contains things that people want. Now, the problem is that the way people have found to essentially absorb these active compounds was essentially to throw the leaves into the bonfire. This has been going on for millennia, and more recently with a new tech called cigarette. But it's always the same principle. You just burn the product and inhale the fumes or the smoke. And this is exactly where the issue lies. And I'd like to take the opportunity to frame the problem, because while nicotine is addictive, we all know that, that's very clear, the issue is the smoke. And that's due to the fact that it's the smoke that is formed of thousands of chemicals, gases, solid particles, that are created from the combustion of an organic material such as tobacco or a cannabis plant. And it's this combustion process that creates this smoke that is inhaled regularly by the smoker that creates the problem. That's why smoke is really the primary cause of diseases associated with smoking tobacco. And so the key challenge for the tobacco industry is to address its consumer requests, which is find a solution to your problem, to address the society's request to find a solution to the problem, and therefore to essentially eliminate smoke. Now this seems easy to say, but we know how hard it is for smokers to quit smoking. And that's why the combination and the marriage of technology, science, and innovation with this very low-tech analog habit of smoking can create breakthroughs and revolutions in that industry from a public health perspective. So Philip Morris International has invested since the turn of the 21st century massive amounts, we're talking 6 billion, and set up state-of-the-art research facilities with 400 scientists to find the best way to address this problem. Because again, having products is quite complicated to start with, but it's not even enough. And this is how part of the challenge is, first of all, you need people to know what is the problem, to try to envisage how that problem could be solved. And that's why awareness, understanding, education is so fundamental when it has to do with a problem linked to smoking. But while this issue is quite clear, there's still more than 1 million smokers in Israel, here in this beautiful country. There are more than 1 billion smokers in the world. And up to now, they only had two choices. Either quit, and we know how difficult that is, or continue smoking and face the consequences that it entails. So here I need to make it very clear that one way or the other, the best way to mitigate all tobacco-related disease and concerns is to quit using tobacco altogether. That's very clear. But however, despite all the warnings, the regulations, the preventions, the restrictions, the avoidance of initiation, the attempts to help people to stop, still the WHO predicts that there's still going to be more than 1 billion smokers in 2025. So the main question is, what do we do for these people? Can't we do something more interesting and more effective? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. Tobacco harm can be reduced if we manage to help smokers transition out of combustible products, like cigarettes, and into products that are smoke-free. As smoke is the issue, smoke-free products can be the solution and present a much lower level of risk. And this is exactly what Philip Morris is doing, and focusing all of its efforts to actually help our own consumers stop buying our own products, cigarettes, and start buying smoke-free products, which are a much better alternative for them, to the point that we actually hope that in the near future we can stop selling cigarettes altogether. And that's a commitment that we made all the way to the top to our CEO. So it does take courage and vision and a commitment to actually disrupt this industry from within, because we're really talking about disruption. Usually, what happens is that it's small incumbents, new venture startups, that come in with solutions to a problem and eventually disrupt and send all big incumbents into obsolescence. But this is the path that the company decided not to take and to let others disrupt it, but to disrupt itself from within. And that has led to a fundamental transformation of the company to the extent of becoming schizophrenic, because on the one hand, the bread and butter is the tobacco and the cigarette business, but the future and the mission is to actually kill that business and replace it, for those who are not able to continue to stop smoking, replace it by better products. So society expects us to act responsibly, and that's exactly what the company is trying to do. But as I said, having the right products is not enough, because if you can have beautiful products smoke-free, if nobody uses them, you're not achieving anything from a public perspective, nor from an individual health perspective. And smokers have a very intimate relation with their product, with their brand. I mean, they're using the product daily, buying it almost daily or every other day. They have a very strong connection to this product they bring to their mouth, that they inhale from, that they might be proud of. And asking them to switch that ritual to something new is very difficult. And that's where having the products is one thing, but making them used and helping consumers, smokers, transition out of cigarettes into smoke-free products is really what the name of the game is about. Because on top of being better from a health perspective, the products need to satisfy what the consumers want for these products to be decent substitutes. And smokers smoke for various reasons: for nicotine, for taste, for ritual, for sensory experiences, for social habits. And that's what we need to provide them with. And that's how we disrupted our own company and led the way in disrupting this whole industry by changing fundamentally the way we operate and the way we work. Because marketing these smoke-free products based on innovation and technology is very different than marketing cigarettes. And that required to enter new fields of electronics, of e-commerce, of solutions, of own retails, of reverse logistics, of customer care, things that we were not used to do when we were managing simply, let's say, cigarettes, where all you do, to make it simple, is to deliver the product to retailers that sell it off the shelf to consumers who point a very specific product because they know what they want. And all of that required a new thinking, a new consumer-centric journey to really handhold these consumers through this path. It's like a diet. I mean, it's great to buy the box and to start eating the pound or whatever it is that helps, or the supplements that help on the diet, but you're only going to feel the benefits and the impacts after months. Or likewise, if you want to improve your cardiovascular pattern, I mean, buying the gym membership is not going to get you anywhere. You better get on the treadmill and start seeing the benefits over months. And the best way to do that, we know, is through help. You can't do this alone. You need help. You need coaching. You need people there who will handhold you and who will help you to stick to transitioning from one habit out of cigarettes into one that is a better alternative. And that's exactly what we've been setting up, is to really equip ourselves with completely new sets of activities and processes that help the consumers, from coaches to call center, to e-commerce, to websites, to digital communication, to own retail stores, to really provide a thorough consumer journey hand-holding these people until they definitely stop smoking cigarettes. And all of this we had to bridge in terms of knowledge in a couple of years, because while e-commerce is very straightforward, well, we had to bridge this 20 years gap in a couple of years to catch up with what was going on. And while we still met with a lot of skepticism in the public opinion, in the regulators' minds, and in some media, this is perfectly understandable, but it's just regrettable because now we believe we can be part of the solution on top of being part of the problem. And we could have done nothing, but we decided to change the future and create a solution to the problem that is out there and set a new course for our smokers and for our company. So I'll conclude by saying that, like so many problems of today, the answer is always technology, science, and innovation. It's true for water scarcity, for food security, for environmental threat, for renewable energies, for plenty of different industries. And here in Israel, we're in the best place to actually know about what innovation is. So why would it be so different in the case of tobacco? Now, it's going to take time, yes. We have a lot to learn, we have a lot to improve, and we certainly could have done things differently and earlier. Now, the cannabis industry is just emerging, and nobody knows which path it's going to take exactly and how it will write its own history. But one thing is sure. As long as people predominantly use cannabis in the form of burning it, smoking it, and therefore inhale the smoke, it will be a big problem that will need to be addressed. A problem that the tobacco industry faced and is solving step by step. That's something that the cannabis industry could learn from. And rather do it earlier than later, given the fact that the industry is just in its nascent state. So the experience of the tobacco industry can be of great use for the cannabis one to establish itself on sound and sustainable fundamentals for the benefit of all. Thank you very much for your attention today.